welcome back to Architectural Adventures brought to you by Historic Springfield Society. I'm your host, Kylie. Thanks for joining me as we tour Springfield's architectural curiosities. And today, here at Architectural Adventures, we are on the road. And we are in Springfield's sister neighborhood of Riverside. And I'm here with my dear friend, Tim Gilmore. And Tim, last I checked, you have written about 16 books. Is that the correct number at this point?
The one we're going to talk about today is actually number 25.
25. So I am way behind. I need to catch up on some of my reading.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to ask, So, yeah.
Yeah, I always enjoy your books, though.
Thank you.
It's you've created a real tapestry of our strange little town of Jacksonville, Florida.
In some ways it is a little town.
Yeah, it is, and we'll talk a little bit about that, how it seems that every historical factoid in our city is somehow interconnected in a big circle.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'd like to, today we're here to talk about your new book, which I'm very excited to hear more about, being as obsessed with architecture as I am, especially the style of house that we'll be talking about, which is my favorite style, the Queen Anne style. And we'll also be talking about preservation. So all of these things are really right up my alley.
I thought about you the whole time I was writing about this. It's like this one, I kept thinking, what will Kylie think about this part? So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you and I go way back. We've known each other, I estimate, about 10 years now.
That seems
think
right.
That's correct.
That seems
because
right.
we worked. So our first project together was Mad Atlas of Virginia King. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Mad Atlas of Virginia King is still one of my favorite projects that I've worked on, and so Virginia King was this strange and intense woman. Not a lot of people knew what she was up to on a regular basis. People saw her walking across the city. She would walk miles a day. She often wore little hats with the netting down over her face, and she would set out regularly to find old houses and old buildings that were about to be demolished and take pictures of them and write about them in a really long book. It wasn't so long at first, but it got much longer, called Interesting Facts and Features About Leading Families in Jacksonville, also where progress has changed a lot of homes and buildings. I got the title slightly wrong. I know it's been a while since I've actually said it out loud. The first issue of her book, which she had printed, was just under 100 pages in 1968. The book kept getting longer across the 70s until it was more than 900 pages, and the last version of the book, which she never printed, is all handwritten. It's all in multiple binders, takes up a whole shelf at the Jacksonville History Center, and it's 8,448 pages. And so I was a little bit afraid that I was Virginia King because of my writing obsession. But when we worked on that project with Hurley Winkler, with you, doing some portraits and doing those maps of all of the places that she lived in across Riverside and places that she wrote about across Springfield, that was a really, really wonderful project for me, and which we later turned into a play at FSCJ. But I don't know if you remember, but when we finished that project, you gave me a Kodak Brownie camera that you had
remember that.
In I believe a thrift shop or something.
And it was at Fans and Stoves.
Fans and Stoves.
The old Fans and Stoves.
Yeah.
And, I wonder, could that have been Virginia King's?
It's not impossible.
The location is correct.
Yeah, so that's true.
I'd like to believe that it was.
Yeah.
I have to say that I have really fond memories of that project because we got to work collaboratively together on something that we were all very passionate about.
Absolutely.
And I will never forget the day that we all piled in my car and we had a list of Virginia's previous addresses, and we just made a pilgrimage around all of the locations in Riverside that she lived in.
It was a pilgrimage.
That was really fun.
That's the right word. Yeah.
It led us on some wild rides.
Yeah. And that project was so much fun, and the thing that I've just finished is a lot of fun in that way to me, and the storytelling of it, the just strange ways that the story goes all over the place in unexpected ways, and the focus on architecture. Yeah, yeah. Again, Virginia King. That project is one of my favorites. One of the favorite things that I've ever done. So
It will
yeah,
always hold a special place in my heart too.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I also want to mention, your website, which we'll put a link to on the screen, Jack Psycho Geo,
Thank
all
you.
about the psychology of geography, which is
Yeah,
incredibly
yeah,
fascinating. And I
yeah.
feel that it's one of those full circle moments right now because
Mm,
where we are sitting is
hmm.
the third floor of the Riverdale Inn on Riverside Avenue, which actually is a stone's throw from the home that we're going to be discussing
That's right.
today.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
do you want to talk about the history of what the significance of the row was, and then one
Yeah.
of the later characters that is connected to Virginia King that resided here at
hmm
one point?
So, different cities had places that they would call Millionaires Row or something like that, or some variation of that. In Jacksonville, there was a row, just called the row, of more than 50 mansions that lined Riverside Avenue, and actually the Lomax Castle, which my new book, When We Tried to Save the Castle, centers on, was part of the row, right across the street from us over there. And we are in what is now the Riverdale Inn. It's a bed and breakfast on Riverside Avenue. It's one of the last houses left that was part of the row. And in the 1970s, it was a boarding house, but also had some business headquarters downstairs. And Virginia King's brother Rufus lived upstairs here. And most people did not know about his connection to Virginia. They were both very peculiar people. But as I was talking to people who used to live in the Lomax Castle in the 1970s, uh, one person I was speaking to described this wonderful, strange old man who always wore a seersucker suit and came by and always wanted to rake up everybody's leaves and lived upstairs in the old boarding house around the corner. And I just was like, there he is. That's Rufus King. And so we're on the third floor. Rufus lived on the third floor. So uncanny kind of connections. They happen constantly.
They do.
Yeah,
He very well could have traversed in this very space we're in.
that's right. Yeah, I'd like to think so.
Yes.
Yeah, I think probably more likely than not.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a nice thought.
yeah.
So, your latest book, I'm really interested to hear how the idea came about, how you
hmm
discovered all of this, because from what you've told me so far about it, and I cannot wait to read it, I'm very excited. Uh, what led to the
Yeah,
discovery of this topic?
yeah. I knew about the house. It was demolished 50 years ago. So, why write about a house that was demolished 50 years ago? I knew about the house, but I stumbled upon I was looking for something else, and I stumbled upon an article in the Jacksonville Journal from October of 1974 about someone who was trying to take the house, the Lomax Castle, trying to take it apart. It was condemned. It was going to be demolished, and he was trying to take it apart piece by piece and move it to Middleburg and rebuild it there. And obviously, I can't help but be captivated and want to know more about such strange quixotic quests. And so that was the start of it. And I often think of um, research and writing projects as rabbit holes, and I get just totally mesmerized. And that was the case with this. Everything that I found out, I thought I was just going to write a story for Jack Psycho Geo about it. Everything that I found out about the history of the Lomax Castle just seemed stranger and stranger, connecting to early Bureau of Investigation files before there was an FBI, to possible spies living here, to in the 60s and 70s, hippies rented out. This is a 3-story house with a tower on one corner, and they rented the whole house out for about $100 a month. Two of them started Edge City, which is a boutique in Five Points. Started as a head shop in late 60s, early 70s, and just all of these stories kept coming forward. And the next thing I knew, it's like there's plenty here for a fun little book, you know. And
Yes,
so
I
yeah,
would say so.
so that's it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
big question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so fascinated by that idea of going to the trouble of dismantling
Oh
such
man.
a large historic home, and we'll have pictures shown of what the castle looked like. So you'll
Mm-hmm.
see that it was not a tiny house. It
Right.
was quite massive.
Yeah.
And
Sure was.
so to look at that and be like, you know what, let's disassemble that.
Right.
And then I'm curious about why Middleburg of all places.
True. All of those things. So the house was going to be demolished. There was a physician in the neighborhood named Emmett Ferguson who lived in another castle. This castle's still there, the Leon Cheek Castle, which is not far from here. And is this enormous Jacobean revival style house. But Ferguson bought lots of old properties in Riverside. This is in the 60s and the 70s, and this is one of the things that I think is really important to understand and that I talk about in the book is what was happening with American cities post World War II. And so neighborhoods like Riverside and Springfield, were in some ways the victims of a whole list of things, from redlining to white flight to, what happened with a lot of these houses being turned into hospital offices and lawyers' offices. And so Ferguson would buy up a lot of old properties that were not in good shape, and he would rent them for as long as they would rent. He would rent them out, but if there was some possibility of them being demolished for some new construction, then he capitalized on that. And so the Lomax Castle was condemned, and there's a tall condo tower standing where Lomax Castle was today. So really, the story is a story about a house, but it's also a story about our cities. Yes, about Jacksonville and about this particular neighborhood, but also about American cities and what America did to its cities in that time period.
And would you say, based on what you've learned about this house,
Mm-hmm.
that it really sparked the preservation movement as we know it and gave birth eventually to Riverside Avondale preservation and then later Springfield preservation and revitalization? Is that a fair
Yeah,
statement?
so RAP, Riverside Avondale Preservation, actually started in early 1974, and then the house was condemned later in 1974. And so, a lot of the early RAP newsletters, which I've got images from in the book and I quote from in the book, a lot of the early RAP newsletters were saying, help us save the castle. And a couple times it looked like there might be some possibility of that happening. Helen Lane, who moved a number of Victorian houses and saved them from demolition, and is responsible in large part for saving the old Prime Osborne. It's now the Prime Osborne Convention Center, but it was the Union Terminal building. There was some possibility that she might actually move the Lomax Castle. If she did, it would have been the largest structure she ever moved. But by that time, the condemnation of the house and along with that, the plan to take it apart and move it was already underway. As for why Middleburg, the person who wanted to do this Saw the the spot that he had purchased as being this kind of pristine spot in the countryside,
Okay.
and so his idea was to um, move the house into this. I don't want to say. I mean, Eden might be too much to, but but it was also the time period of the back to the land movement and everything else, and that was part of his thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, the movement of houses and buildings is actually more common in the preservation world than people realize. It
yeah,
happens more often than people think.
yeah,
I know some people are really surprised when they hear about the movement of a whole house,
yeah. Right.
but sometimes it's a quite drastic move to save it,
Hmm.
or in this case, relocate it. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about that. If Because I know you're so into psychogeography,
Hmm.
so does that really change I mean, to move the building from
Yeah,
its original intent, its
yeah.
original setting,
Right.
because that's happened a lot in Riverside homes.
Uh-huh.
There was one home that was moved to Palm Valley in the early 90s from
Right.
5 Points right over here.
Right.
In
Yeah.
Springfield, in the early 90s, when they built Andrew Robinson Elementary,
Mm.
a whole side of West 12th, they moved six
Mm.
houses,
Mm.
one of which was taken to Palatka,
Mm.
and we're still trying to find it. But
Oh,
it's
really?
kind of like, give us our house back. Like, why did
Yeah.
you take
Yeah,
our
yeah,
house?
yeah. No, I think that's a really good question, so a house is the house that it is, but it is also partly inevitably defined by its context, its place. And so this house was on the water at the end of Lomax Street, really 2 blocks from the traffic star at 5 Points that gives the 5 Points district its name. And so yes, the house was distinctive, absolutely, but the neighborhood was distinctive, is distinctive. And lots of houses from its era around here are no longer here, including at the corner of Lomax and Riverside Avenue. Was the old house where the Jacksonville Children's Museum was located, which later moved and became the Museum of Science and History. A house is the house that it is in its particular place and in its particular time. And I find that really interesting because the Lomax Castle existed in several very distinctively different time periods. I mean, it's built in the 1890s. And even by the early 1900s, there's a German businessman, Hermann Weibert, and his wife Carrie had moved here from Savannah. Already, the time period was very different, but by the 60s and 70s, as the neighborhood had changed so much, part of what happened when a lot of the old, original, wealthy, and white families fled from an area like this is that different forms of counterculture moved in. And that 5 Points became kind of, in a lot of people's minds, the capital or the center of counterculture in Jacksonville. And so, I talked to so many people who remembered going by the castle, and it was in the early 70s. It was a place where the doors were kind of figuratively always open, and people came and went a lot. And its personality became a distinct part of the personality of the time and the place. So, if the attempt to move it and rebuild it elsewhere had worked, then that would have been an amazing story in and of itself, and the house would be wherever it would be. But it also would not have been the same house it was when it was the place where it was built.
And another thing that really resonates with me, being an aficionado who is, I would say, obsessed with architecture
Yeah.
and especially local architecture,
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that the elements that came together to culminate in these homes
Mm.
will never happen again.
Yeah, that's absolutely
I mean, the culture, the materials,
mm,
the stylistic choices.
all of those things.
It's just it was the
Yeah,
perfect storm in each respective era,
yeah,
and
yeah.
really we will never see what we have
That's
now
right.
is what we have.
That's right. And I mean, that's so important, and those particular aspects I think are so important, both in terms of the time when it was built, because as you said, it's a Queen Anne style house, so it had this corner tower, it has this asymmetry, it had a widow's walk on top. But also, in in terms of the counterculture, there was a kind of um, uh, uh, neo, at the same time anti-Victorian aesthetic that happened with the hippies. As you know, with the painted ladies in
Mhm.
Haight-Ashbury and San Francisco. I mean, you can't really separate the hippie culture from a lot of those Queen Anne style houses that were made affordable to them because the formerly wealthy people had fled. you know?
It's a very interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, it really is. Dichotomy or even dialectic things come back around, but in different ways than they were the first time.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I know when we spoke previously about this project, you detailed to me about making a walk, if you will, across
Yeah,
the modern Five Points
right.
and describing that walk. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what that experience was like?
Sure. I mean, so if you start at the traffic star, center to 5 Points, you've got Hovan Mediterranean restaurant across the street. You've got there's a two-story commercial building where Edge City, founded by a couple of the hippies who lived in the castle, where one of its locations was. There was an upstairs location called Edge City Up, and there's still, I think, a feel. It's changed a lot, but there's still a feel for the kind of counterculture of the time. When you walk down Lomax Street, there were there until recently rainbow painted crosswalks until the state decided that those were too upsetting to have. So it's another topic,
I
but
feel much safer now, I
yeah,
know.
right, yeah, yeah. So threatened by rainbows. But and across the street, the artist Jim Draper in the '90s, I think it was the '90s or the early or the 2000 aughts, did there was a mural of the different art movements of the 20th century that used to be there. It's a really diverse area in terms of ethnic restaurants on both sides of the street, and you walk past the Unity Church, which was one of the first religious organizations in the city to be supportive of LGBT rights. A lot of things that really fit the personality of the 5 Points district, and it's only it's 2 blocks from that traffic star to the river where the castle used to be. So it's an interesting walk, and it ends now in the tower, the condo tower that replaced the castle, which is you know obviously symbolic.
Which I think is very important to the overall
Yeah,
narrative of Jacksonville.
it is
It speaks a
absolutely.
lot to
Yeah,
our culture, our city.
right.
It says a lot.
Yeah, you went to Savannah College of Art and Design, right?
I
And
did.
I remember that in the book Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Um, I forget which street. Maybe but there's a certain street in Savannah that the people there said that everything south of that was North Jacksonville, by which they meant it wasn't distinctively architecturally Savannah, and a kind of dig at Jacksonville. But the thing is, Jacksonville has this for all that it's lost, it's got an incredible collection of architecture.
Yes.
And one of the things that I have said so much over the years is that the city has, in so many ways, been bad at telling its own story and stories. And I think this kind of story is important to tell, and both its tragic aspects, but also it's just fascinating turns of plot and character.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, it has been such a joy to get the chance to sit and talk with you. While we were sitting here talking, I thought of a question that I want to ask you as our last question, because I fear that we are running out of time, even though I could sit and talk to you
Right.
for hours
Absolutely.
about
Yeah.
Jacksonville and architecture.
Yeah.
So, in doing this project and doing research, was there something that you found very interesting to learn that you didn't know before, or that was very surprising to
Yeah.
learn?
A number of things. One thing that really stands out is, I had mentioned Hermann Weibert and his wife Carrie. Hermann was born in Germany in the late 1800s, and they moved here from Savannah, and they were fully accepted into the city and the community. But just before World War One, sentiment in the U.S. changes, and all this is the same time as the Lost Cause and Jim Crow, which don't affect German-born immigrants at all, but because of World War One and the shifting geopolitics, there is this new kind of suspicion of people with Germanic backgrounds. And another person locally who really suffered from that is the architect Henry John Clutho, whose career was really damaged by that in some ways that maybe he never came back from. And one way that these two people intersect in an interesting way, I think, is that Clutho designed the Germania Club, which was down the street on Riverside Avenue. And so Vibert was a member of the club. It wasn't one of the most active members, but the whole German community, which included a lot of business leaders in Jacksonville, really suffered a kind of, nativist backlash. And so Vibert actually had a Bureau of Investigation, which is the organization that preceded the FBI, a Bureau of Investigation file, which is now publicly accessible. And so I went through, and there were people in Jacksonville who reported that he was suspicious because he still had a German accent, et cetera, et cetera. And there are some very odd tales that I'll just leave it at that. That are preserved in those Bureau of Investigation files, which ultimately, like most immigrants, Vibert was very devoted to his adopted homeland, and there was nothing seditious, but this was the time of suspicion of sedition, and he suffered from that. Now, that's a really interesting aspect of the whole history of the Lomax Castle too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And would you mind telling our viewers where they can get your book?
Absolutely. So when we tried to save the castle is available at all the independent bookstores locally, Chamberlain Bookmine, Chamberlain's Uptown, Happy Medium Books and Cafe, the Literary Lounge, the Next Chapter in Avondale, San Marco Bookstore. And if you must, you could get it on Amazon too, but please support your local independent booksellers first. That's always
Yes.
where I lean.
Practice your psychogeography and go to a
That's
local
right.
spot. Find your favorite local bookstore. You
That's
mentioned
right.
a whole list of wonderful ones to check out. So
Yeah.
if you haven't been to any of those, it's a great opportunity to stop by and pick up a copy of When We Tried to Save the Castle.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank
Tim,
you, Kylie.
thank you. It's been a pleasure as always. I love any chance I
Likewise.
get to sit and talk with a kindred spirit regarding
Yes.
architecture and
Yes.
our quirky place of Jacksonville.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks
until
so much.
next time, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Architectural Adventures.
All right.